Okay, welcome back to our study on the multiple creation accounts that are found in the Bible. So here we were looking at Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, and we talked about the translation from Hebrew of Genesis chapter 1 verse 2, where we looked at the words was without form and the earth was without form and void, and we realized that what it's actually saying is that the earth became a desolate and undistinguishable ruin, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the waters. The earth was flooded. It was covered in darkness. It had become an undistinguishable ruin, and it was a desolate and empty place. That is what is described for us there in verse 2. So we had looked at that. So just to continue, and we had also said that when God created anything in from Genesis chapter 1 verse 3 onwards, the one thing that we note is that everything he created was good. It says, and God said, let there be light, and God saw the light that it was good. When you look at Genesis chapter 1, everything God created, he said that it was good. Okay? So now we move to, that was the first thing that I wanted us to note. So why would God, if everything God created was good, and what we have been described for in Genesis 1 verse 2 is not good, doesn't it tell us that something happened to what God created? Because why would God create a vast and desolate waste, cover it with darkness and flood it with waters to begin with? The answer is he did not. We must thus take verse 1 as an account of a creation with no details about it other than the fact that there was a heaven and an earth, and they were destroyed, and a flood and darkness covered it. The other fact is that the first world was destroyed with a flood. That is why we are told it was an empty waste, and that it was lying under the water and covered in darkness. So there are various proofs to there being actually a first creation in that Genesis 1:1. The words we were looking at there, tohu and bohu. You see this word here, tohu, that we're looking at, without form. It's what is translated as without form. And bohu, which is translated as void. But we've looked at their actual translations then, we've seen what they were actually saying. It's used in only one other place in the Bible, and that's in Jeremiah chapter 4. Jeremiah, when you go to Jeremiah chapter 4, this gives us more details. Let me go to the one which we can read easily. So it gives us further details into what this tohu vobohu means. That's verse 19. So Jeremiah is talking about Judah's desolation. You know, the way these people put prophecy out there, they would be speaking about one thing, but then in it they actually put in details about either something prophetic or speak of something in the past, things like that. So now let's just read shortly what he said from verse 19 to 26. My bowels, I am pained at my very heart. My heart maketh a noise in me. I cannot hold my peace, because thou hast heard, O my soul, the sound of the trumpet, the alarm of war. Destruction upon destruction is cried, for the whole land is spoiled. Suddenly are my tents spoiled, and my curtains in a moment. How long shall I see the standard and hear the sound of the trumpet? Just bear with me, we'll get to where we are going. For my people is foolish, they have not known me. They are sottish children, that's silly children, and they have none understanding. They are wise to do evil, but to do good they have no knowledge. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. Do you see the words again? I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. Remember the darkness that was there? I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heaven were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and by his anger. So this is describing a situation of judgment. And of course, when you look at Genesis 1 verse 2, and you even see the flood actually speaks of judgment, because we know about the flood that came in Genesis 6 as well. But here we look at those words which we saw in Genesis 1 verse 2. They're used here again. And Jeremiah is saying that he beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form. That means it was, what did we say? It was in what is it? In the first reference, tohu. It was a waste. It was a desolation. It was void. It was an undistinguishable ruin. That's what he saw. And the heavens, and they had no light. Because you see, whatever the first devastation of the earth, the first devastation of this creation was so complete and total. It was such terrible destruction that even the heavens had no light. You know, in Genesis 1, we are told that God made the lights of the heavens. He made the stars, he made the moon, he made the sun, and he put them in the heavens. But here we are told the heavens, and they had no light. You know, when he's speaking about because Jeremiah, of course, was prophesying about Judah and about the coming, when they would be taken into exile. But even in that time, the earth actually didn't lose its form. It did not become an undistinguishable ruin. So this is how we start seeing Jeremiah speaking of things that had happened on the earth before. And I believe the Lord was putting this here so that we can actually know what happened to the very first creation. Because he's saying that even the heavens had no light. The judgment that was there was so heavy. Everything was destroyed, including the lights that were in the sky. Can you imagine a thing like that? An undistinguishable ruin. That's what void means. And that's what we read about in Genesis 1 verse 2. So I just wanted to show you that you can still go and do your own reference. You can go and do your study and do your reference. And then you can see that actually it's mirroring Genesis 1 verse 2. Then now we have the testimony of this first creation being destroyed by water. There's a small excerpt from Peter, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 5 up to 7. It says, let me just go here so that we can read it together from the Bible. 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse, let me go to the one which is easier to read. Chapter 3, verse 5 to 7. This is where he was addressing the scoffers who are saying, you keep saying Jesus is coming back. I mean, even since our fathers fell asleep, since the beginning of the creation, we have been here. You have been saying he has never come. So he was addressing them. And this is what he was saying. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old. That is, they became. The heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. Look at this. The world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. But the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So he tells us that first world perished by water. It was overflowed with water. And then he tells us the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word of God, are kept in store, reserved unto fire, because this one which we are in is going to be destroyed by fire. So this is what Peter was referring to. The first earth was created, the first creation was destroyed by water. And this is not Noah's day, because you see, Noah's day, the life was destroyed, but Noah and his family remained. But now the destruction of that world completely. So he tells us it was by water. So he isn't speaking of the flood in Noah's day. He tells us that the heavens and the earth of old existed by the word of the Lord. In verse 6, he informs us that the world was destroyed by water and perished. And in verse 7, tells us that the current heavens and earth, still sustained by God's word, will be destroyed by fire. So he speaks of the scoffers being ignorant of the word of God. We can only learn of the earth from what we have been given. Peter speaks of the first creation being destroyed by water. We don't know what happened to the second one. All we know is that by the time our ancient father Adam was formed, the earth was bare. So then the other thing that I wanted us to look at just shortly, Jesus said in John 8:44, you belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth. So now this beginning, I was looking at this word beginning, and when I looked at it, because the New Testament is translated from Greek, it was this word, arche or something, I don't know how they pronounce it, which means a commencement or chief in various applications of order, time, place, or rank. So at the very beginning, the devil was a murderer. In Genesis 1:1, the word says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The word beginning here is translated from the Hebrew word reshith, which means first in place, time, order, or rank. So at that beginning, I think we'll need to continue the next video.